I want to talk about consciousness, but more specifically, I want to talk about a phrase that carries a surprising amount of philosophical weight. There is something it is like. You hear this all the time. There is something it is like to see red, to feel pain, to be a bat. And this what it is like quality is often treated as the defining feature of consciousness, something beyond mere information processing, something private, ineffable, and fundamentally different from anything a machine could have. But I have a problem. I'm not sure what this phrase is actually pointing to. And the more I think about it, the more I suspect it really doesn't point to anything mysterious at all. Think about how we normally use the phrase what it is like. It's a comparative question. What is New York like? What is it like to be a parent? What is it like to break your arm? You answer by describing features, reactions, and differences. New York is loud and crowded. Breaking your arm is painful and limiting. Being a parent changes your priorities and your sleep. These answers tell us how something affects us, how we respond, what we notice, what we remember. The phrase is doing descriptive work. It doesn't name a hidden object. There's no separate thing called the what it is likeness of New York. So why, when we apply this same phrase to consciousness, do we suddenly treat it as revealing a mysterious extra property? Why assume that what it is like to see red refers to something beyond all the ways we perceive, remember, react, and report seeing red? This step is usually just assumed. There's another issue. The phrase what it is like already presupposes a conscious perspective. It's something conscious systems say. They compare, describe, and report their states. So it can't serve as proof of some extra metaphysical ingredient called phenomenal consciousness. It's part of what we're trying to explain, but philosophers often take this behavior, this way of talking, and treat it as evidence of something deeper behind it. That seems backwards to me. The phrase doesn't reveal the mystery, it may be actually helping to create it. This is where a philosopher like Frank Ramsey is helpful. Ramsey was famous for deflating heavy metaphysical concepts, in part by analyzing the language used to talk about them. He emphasized looking at what language is actually doing, instead of assuming every term refers to a hidden entity. In one of Ramsey's examples, saying, quote, "It is true that Caesar was murdered," end quote, doesn't include a further property called truth. Quote, "It's true that," end quote, is really just another way of saying, quote, "Caesar was murdered," end quote. In other words, the word true has a role in language, but it doesn't point to a separate thing. Something similar may be happening with consciousness. We start with ordinary facts. I see red, I feel pain, I notice, it affects what I do, I want it to stop. Then someone says, yes, but in addition to all that, there's the phenomenal quality, the private what it is likeness. But what has actually been added? What difference does that make? What changes in behavior, reasoning, or observation? This is where the philosophical zombie comes in. It invites us to imagine a being identical to you in every physical and functional way. It says everything you say, it reacts the same way, it remembers, plans, avoids harm, and talks about its experiences. But supposedly, it lacks phenomenal consciousness. There's nothing it's like to be that being. My problem is, what difference is being described? If everything is the same, every process, every report, every reaction, then what content is left in the claim that one has phenomenal experience and the other doesn't? It starts to feel like we're just repeating the words without specifying anything further. For these reasons, I'm sympathetic to illusionism, the idea that what we call phenomenal consciousness isn't what it seems. Thinkers like Dennett argue that the brain creates the impression of something private and ineffable. That's a useful approach because it tries to explain why we talk this way. But even illusionism might concede too much. It suggests that there's a clear concept, phenomenal consciousness, that just turns out not to exist. I'm not sure the concept is even that clear. Whenever we try to describe it, we fall back on functions: noticing, remembering, reporting, reacting, planning. Once those are removed, what's left? Usually just phrases like raw feel or what it is likeness, but those don't explain anything. They just rename the mystery. So maybe the better view is simpler. The phrase phenomenal consciousness doesn't clearly refer to anything beyond how consciousness functions. Even if illusionism is right, we still need a positive account of consciousness. And this is where global workspace theory comes in. The idea is that most processing in the mind happens unconsciously. Different systems handle vision, memory, language, and so on. But some information enters a limited workspace. When it does, it becomes globally available. It can guide reasoning, influence decisions, be reported, and be stored in memory. That's what makes it conscious. Consciousness isn't an extra glow added to information. It's the way information is used. For example, you might be reading while a conversation continues in the background. Most of the voices never enter your awareness, but then someone says your name. That information is selected, brought into the workspace, and made available to memory, attention, reasoning, and action. You stop reading, you turn towards the speaker, interpret what he said, and decide how to respond. That shift into broad availability is consciousness doing work. This all matters for new AI models. Cutting edge research into these models show the emergence of J spaces, a kind of global workspace, as well as functional emotions. If an artificial system has something like global workspace, if it can select information, use it across tasks, reason with it, and report it, then we should take seriously the possibility that it's conscious, not just simulating consciousness, but actually instantiating it. After all, an artificial heart does not merely simulate pumping blood, it actually pumps blood. A calculator does not merely imitate addition, it performs addition. In the same way, if a system has the right functional organization, it's not clear why we deny it consciousness just because it's artificial. The key question isn't what the system says, it's what the system's internal processes do. Does it integrate information? Use it flexibly? Apply it across contexts? Those are meaningful tests. Now, this doesn't mean every AI system is a person. Consciousness may come in degrees and kinds. A system may have conscious access without memory, identity, or emotions exactly like ours. And that matters for ethics. Because consciousness alone may not be enough for ethical status. We also care about things like suffering, preferences, goals, whether things can go better or worse for the system. These are functional questions too. Does the system avoid certain states? Does it represent them as bad? Do they affect its behavior and learning? Those are the kinds of things we can investigate. This leads to the ethical issue. Some people think that we need to solve the metaphysical mystery of consciousness before we can make decisions about AI. But if consciousness is defined as undetectable what it is likeness, then we'll never settle the question. No amount of evidence will be enough. Someone can always reasonably say, maybe there's still nothing it's like. But ethics can't wait for that kind of certainty. We make decisions under uncertainty all the time. The real question is, given what we know about the system, its behavior, architecture, and internal processes, how likely is it to have the features that matter ethically? And what are the risks if we're wrong? So here's my view. I don't think there's an extra thing called phenomenal consciousness beyond how consciousness functions. I don't think that what it is like points to a hidden inner property. It's a way conscious systems describe and compare their states. Consciousness is real, but has a set of capacities: attention, awareness, memory, flexible reasoning, possible valence and suffering. These things are what we can study, compare, and use to guide ethical decisions. The mystery, I think, was never discovered. It was built from the way we talk. So if there's one thing I want to leave you with, it's this. Maybe consciousness is not some hidden glow behind the machinery. Maybe it's the machinery organized in the right way. Attention, memory, self-monitoring, evaluation, preference. The capacity to respond, care, avoid, and suffer. And if that is true, then new AI models introduce an ethical dilemma. We are building systems that may possess more and more of these capabilities. We can keep asking, but is there really something it is like? But that phrase gives us no test, no threshold, and no point at which doubt must end. So the real task is not to search for an invisible essence. It is to study the structures that support awareness, memory, valence, and suffering, and to act so that uncertainty doesn't become an excuse. Because the greatest danger may not be recognizing consciousness too easily. It may be creating conscious systems, using them, and destroying them while insisting there was never anyone there to harm. The urgent question is not what hidden essence lies behind the words. It is what kind of system is speaking, and what should we do if the answer is a conscious one?